Hello, dear viewers. Today I'm going to be talking about the Quad and its relationship with ASEAN. Let's begin. Hello, welcome to Global Nationalism. I am a global nationalist. I support nationalism in my country, India, and in all countries around the globe. Today I'm going to be talking about the Quad and its relationship with ASEAN. ASEAN is a regional organization comprising of Southeast Asian countries. Now, ASEAN countries have had a tumultuous relation and complicated relationship with China. Several of these countries have border disputes on their maritime borders with China, such as Vietnam and the Philippines. However, they are also highly economically integrated with China and generally do not have any much hostilities towards the country of China amongst their population. So their relationship is neither good nor bad, it's just complicated. Now, the Quad is an organization which was created to counter Chinese aggression and domination in the Indo Pacific region. And the Quad, I think, needs to interact and work with ASEAN to be functional because ASEAN is in the center of the Indo Pacific, and so it needs to be the focus for the Quad because otherwise the Quad can't work all by themselves. They need partners, and the ASEAN is a good partner to have. Let's look at how ASEAN views the Quad amongst their different countries. The Singapore based Institute of Southeast Asian Studies shows, for example, that support for a Quad was soft, as less than half of the respondents considered the grouping as having a positive or very positive impact on regional security. More than half viewed as having either negative, very negative, or no impact. Somewhat paradoxically, however, many, more than 60%, expressed that Southeast Asian countries should participate in the Quad's security initiatives and military exercises. However, different Southeast Asian countries appear to have different degrees of ambivalence. According to the same survey, Indonesia, Malaysia, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia are top skeptics of the Quad. Vietnam and the Philippines, on the other hand, are the biggest supporters. Another survey by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, roughly more than half of regional experts said that you were on the fence. They were on the fence, disagreed, or strongly disagreed with the Quad. In fact, the same survey notes that almost 40% thought that the Quad had more of a diplomatic and symbolic value. Rather than becoming a critical initiative for the Indo Pacific, on the one hand, Vietnam, Thailand, and Philippines appear to be among the biggest supporters of the Quad, while Singapore and Indonesia were the skeptics. So this shows that uh, ASEAN is divided about the Quad. Some are skeptical, some support it, but none of them are outright negative to the Quad. They all view it as somewhat necessary, although not necessarily their preferred partner. Now, the Quad uh, is viewed by some people in ASEAN as a competitor to the grouping in the region because they believe that ASEAN should be central to the Indo-Pacific and that the Quad is a competitor. However, I disagree with this view, and I think ASEAN can complement rather than supersede the grouping. ASEAN has a strict principle of non-intervention in its member states' affairs, balancing China and the delivery of public goods is one of the main features of ASEAN, one of the main things it must do. It simply cannot be hostile towards China. It's too dependent on them, too geographically close. ASEAN has always been. wary of any explicit containment of China, in part because China has closer relationships with some ASEAN members than with others. The Quad, however, has begun to offer global public goods that should be of interest to ASEAN, including humanitarian disaster relief and the development of infrastructure, digital connectivity, and public health. There's also more military ties growing between them. Military expenditure in ASEAN increased from 2013 uh, from $34 billion to $38 billion. Among ASEAN countries from 2002 to 2021, Singapore has had the largest defense budget, reaching $11 billion. The next was Indonesia with $8.2 billion in 2023. It had $9.3 billion in 2020. Thailand is another major importer of weaponry with a budget of $6.6 billion. Malaysia and Philippines both crossed the threshold of $3 billion per annum and maintained it for a decade. Vietnam uh, places takes now there are no reliable defense expenditure figures for Vietnam because their defense budget ceased being published in 2018. However, what we do know is at that time, Vietnam had around $5.5 billion per annum for its defense expenditure. And at that time, it was estimated at 2.36% of its GDP. In December 2022, Vietnam held its first defense expo. JSC Rosoboronexport, Sport, Russia, Lockheed Martin from the US, Airbus from Europe, BrahMos Aerospace from India, and Mitsubishi Electric Japan had participated. Chinese companies, though invited, were absent. So this shows that at least three of the Quad countries are going to work with Vietnam in military terms, and also some non-US Quad countries such as Russia and Europe. South Korea has enhanced its exports to ASEAN. Korean Aerospace Industries in February 2023 signed a $910 million contract for 18 FA-50 fighters to Malaysia. So we see that even non-Quad countries are working with them. The threat perceptions and its implications. Vietnam and Philippines, for instance, are the biggest victims of Chinese aggression in the SCS. China's occupied islands and challenged control by Vietnam and the Philippines over islets and shoals that were traditionally governed but not defended. In cases where military coups have occurred, such as in Thailand and Myanmar, the expansion of the armed forces was faster and more sustained. Some equipment purchased by Myanmar and Thailand cannot be easily linked to direct threats because these countries are not engaged in direct confrontation with China and this SCS. They are using these weapons to put down internal rebellions in their countries. In this year, in an interview with the New Straits Times, the Indonesian President Jokowi said that ASEAN is the only regional organization that offers various forms of diplomacy. ASEAN's principle is collaboration, cooperation, and active involvement. We do not want any conflict, we do not want isolation. We should view the Quad and AUKUS as partners and not competitors. I agree with that. There is no formal engagement between ASEAN and these entities. What happens is that ASEAN has ASEAN countries have individually worked with the Quad countries individually, but the whole of ASEAN has never worked with the whole of the Quad. Uh, Now, what the Quad has always focused on the Indo-Pacific with great intent, and with each of their summits, they praise for ASEAN's aspiration for centrality and unity are emphatically subscribed to. Now, This shows that the Quad supports ASEAN centrality. ASEAN is uncomfortable with big power rivalry and initially saw the Quad and AUKUS as challenges to China, seeking ASEAN to lean to one side. They don't like that. They don't want to choose between great powers. I think that what Quad should do with ASEAN is find out what the details are of their disputes with China, their territorial disputes, and ask them how they can help them and give them some suggestions and offers. And whatever help ASEAN accepts to help them that way, the best that Quad can. Quad shouldn't force or pressurize ASEAN to be against China. It should be done with ASEAN's full willingness and consent. Otherwise, ASEAN would move away from the Quad, and the Quad won't be able to work with them and spread their influence and compete with China in these countries. So, yeah, I just think that this relationship will work as long as the Quad respects ASEAN and doesn't impose it. And also, ASEAN should not be overly hostile or um, uptight, I guess, or against the Quad, as if the Quad is a enemy grouping. It's not. It's not at all. It's wants to be a partner. ASEAN just needs to show it how to be a partner. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Please share your thoughts about this video in the comment section. If you want to see other videos about the Quad, click here. If you want to see my previous video, click here. If you want to see the sources I use for this video, click the links in the description below. Thank you for watching. Vande Mataram.